My friends call me optimistic, positive, and even uplifting. Well, I'm here to tell you that there have been times in my life where that was not necessarily always the case. Take about 2.5 years ago, for instance. I'd lost my job, and I was feeling really sorry for myself. I started ruminating, those thoughts that keep going in your head. I started to have doubts about myself, my future, my life. A lot has changed since then. What happened? Well, right around the same time, in November 2011, I was volunteering at a youth camp, and I met another volunteer. Her name was Isabel. Now, Isabel was that young, dynamic woman with short, spiky hair. And it turns out that Isabel was in about the same situation I was in, except that Isabel had a plan. Isabel wanted to become a strength-based coach. I've never even heard of such a thing. But Isabel was so enthusiastic, and she talked about this book that I went out and got the book, and I read it. The book is by Griet Bouwen, a Flemish woman, and is called Vuurwerk, which translates into fireworks or fireworks. And I was on fire. Yeah. You see, this book is meant for coaches and HR professionals. And it suggests that when coaching people about their jobs, instead of making an inventory of their strengths and weaknesses, you have them tell you their stories about past successes and life-giving moments. And that's how you find out what their strengths are, and their passions, and their dreams. This so resonated with me that I went out and did research on all the underlying theories and approaches. And that's how I stumbled upon strength-based approaches, including something called appreciative inquiry. So I went out and I read everything that I could get my hands on, and I became a trained facilitator. And tonight, you're going to be the lucky people. We're going to find out how you can use these approaches, which come out of organizational development, in your own lives, be it at your school, at work, at your teams, wherever. Now, I'm going to use some examples from corporate and companies, but all of them apply and can be used in schools as well, and they have. Appreciative inquiry and other strengths-based approaches have two things in common. They both start from the premise that what we give attention to grows. What we give attention to grows. And second, that every individual and every organization and every school has something they're really good about. Something that works really well, a positive core. And if we start working from that positive core, we usually reach much better and inspired results. Now, the trick is, of course, to find that positive core. How do we go about that? we have to go on a discovery tour. Think back to a time in your life when you were at your best, when you lost track of time and space around you. You were in the flow, or the zone, as they say. What was happening? What did you do? What made it so? What are you proud of in yourselves? What are your wishes for the future? Now, in an organizational setting, what typically happens, you invite the whole system, including customers, suppliers, parents, students, or whoever has something to do with the organization. And then you pair up people across the hierarchical level and the departmental level. And so you could have, for instance, a CEO sit together with a financial assistant and ask each other questions such as, think back to your professional life, either with this organization or elsewhere, where you were at your best, your most competent. You were full of energy. What were you doing? What was happening? What made it so? And, without being humble, what do you value most about yourself? And what are your 3 wishes for this organization? You see, when you do an intervention like that, there's usually this huge buzz in the room. Because no one ever asks questions like that. Right? What are the questions we're asked when we get together for meetings? Where are the gaps? Where do we have to do better? Where are the problems? Remember, what we give attention to grows. So if we are going to study problems, what happens? We're going to find more problems. Now, this is not to say that there are sometimes times where we have to address certain issues, for sure. But at the best, we can solve that problem. But in order to create something extraordinary, we have to use more inspired methods and questions. Let me ask you something else. Think back to a time where you were unexpectedly called in to see your principal or your boss. What was your first reaction? Uh-oh, what did I do wrong? What's the problem? What was your first reaction? Did you feel a little ill at ease, anxious, nervous, or anything like any of these guys? Think back to a time when, out of the blue, you received a sincere compliment for a job well done. How is that? Chances are you wanted to do more of the same. You were energized, motivated, happy. Now, why is that? Now, why is the focus on our life-giving stories, our past successes, everything that's positive? Why is that so much more powerful and effective? Well, what happens is, when we're faced with the positive, there are all kinds of things happening in our brains. Chemicals, neurotransmitters, hormones, happy hormones are being released. And one of them, as you can see already, is dopamine. You see that VTA? That stands for ventral tegmental area. Fancy word. But that's where most of the dopamine gets released. And it then travels up into our prefrontal cortex. I'm sure every one of you knows that this is where our cognition lies and our complex thinking.
but it's also the seed for our motivation, creativity, and action. So when this part of the brain here is flooded with dopamine, we are energized, we feel on a high, and we haven't even smoked anything. Yeah, because it's like a drug, except it's natural. So the more we shift our thinking away from the problems, from our shortcomings, I'm not pretty enough, I'm not good enough, I'm not smart enough, to all that is good in ourselves, to all that's good around us. And here I'd like to add, also to all that we are thankful for, because that has the same effect. The more we are motivated, creative, happier and better people to be around with. We're also more optimistic and hopeful for the future. And what do you know? It also boosts our immune system. So now that we know and have examined and discovered what gives us energy, what we're passionate about, what we're really good at, now it's time to create our dream future. And it is so important to have a dream. Like Cheryl said, a scary dream is best. A real big one. Yes. Create a detailed picture of your dream future. Take the elements of your past successes and your life-giving moments, your best moments in your life, and make sure those elements are in your desired future. If you get a kick out of writing, well, keep on writing. If you have a passion for swimming in the ocean, make sure you have water in that picture. And if you really rock at organizing, well, make sure you give that a space. Now here's the important part. It's all good to have this picture in our heads, but you know how it goes. There's a lot of stuff that goes into our heads every single day. And before we know it, that dream picture is out the window. This is why it's so important to document your dream. Either in writing, or in drawing, or in a picture, or whatever you can come up with. Because only when we can see it can we visualize it. That's why it's called a vision. Let me show you a vision image, or a dream picture that was created by the people of Anfield. Anybody ever heard of Anfield? Yeah, they have a stadium, right? Yeah. But from what I understand, I've never been there. There's not a lot else. In fact, it's quite an underprivileged area. But they got together for 2 days of discovering and dreaming. And this is the picture they came up with. Cool, huh? Pretty inspiring. Do you think you can do that? Sure you can, in your own way. So, anyway, so once we have a picture of our dream in our head and out there so we can see it, we can explore the possibilities and the building blocks to get us there. What are the courses you need to take? What might be volunteer opportunities that could be helpful? But this is also a good moment to invite your teachers, your counselors, your family, colleagues, whatever, to help you create those building blocks. Now that we have we've discovered what we're good at, we're dreaming, we have our dream future, we have the building blocks to get there. Now we need to deliver on it, and we have to create our destiny. In organizations, what happens at this point is typically individuals step forward, including the CEO, everybody, and make offerings of special services or skills, accommodations, or request them. And that's also where they get really creative and innovative, where they start hacking old methods, like we heard from Logan. Yeah, they do that at that phase. And then for you, this is the time where you need to take action every single day and ask yourself every single day, what action, however tiny, or brave, or creative, Or magnificent, can I do today to get me one step closer to my goal? To come back to my own life, well, I took the lessons to heart and I went out to discover what I'm passionate about and what I'm good at. And based on that, I built the dream of becoming a coach and facilitator. Took the steps to get there, and now I deliver on it every day. Now here's something else, something interesting that happened in the process. And that is, whereas before I had an average of maybe 5, 6 negative thoughts to every positive one, well, I was able to turn it around to about 6 on average positive ones to 1 negative. And as a result, I have twice as much energy. Must be all the dope that I have in me. Now get out and do the detective work on yourself and on your desired future. Here are 3 things I'd like you to do. Find out what a special, fantastic, and unique person you are. And focus on that consistently. Get yourself a special little notebook and start writing down the stories of your past successes and your life-giving moments and the strengths that come out of it. In the beginning, you may only have 3 or 4, but I bet you if you stick with it, after a week, you might have 103 or 4. Second, be grateful for all that you have. I challenge you to, for 28 days, sit down every single day and write down 3 things that you're grateful for. And then watch what happens in the process and at the end of the 28 days. Third, be contagious. Go out in your communities, at work, at school, your teams, and start asking different questions. Questions like, what are we good at? What are we doing well? What do we appreciate in ourselves? And watch how you can put a sparkle in people's eyes and how you can make their environment and yours more positive and more productive. Because, you guessed it, what did I say earlier? What we give attention to grows. There you go.